This acknowledgement does not emerge from a momentary trend or a fan-driven bubble. Instead, it stems from measurable outcomes. Streaming figures that dominate charts on platforms like Spotify and Apple Music, social media engagement that eclipses even Hollywood mainstays, endorsement, deals with billion-dollar brands, and an ability to mobilize audiences across continents. The recognition Jungkook receives in US media is not based on sentiment, but rooted in verifiable success. Publications ranging from Billboard to Forbes repeatedly emphasize his ability to shatter industry expectations. Each new headline underscores the same idea: there is no direct competitor within the current US entertainment ecosystem who can parallel his momentum. American media coverage often frames this through comparisons. When Jungkook releases a solo single, the question is not whether it will chart in South Korea, but how it will perform on the Billboard Hot 100, how many streams it will gather globally within 24 hours, and whether it will set new YouTube or Spotify records. Unlike many international acts who face challenges in the US market due to linguistic or cultural differences, Jungkook's releases integrate seamlessly into the global streaming environment. This dynamic forces US outlets to admit an uncomfortable truth. An artist from outside the US has effectively set new benchmarks that domestic acts cannot easily match. One reason American media continues to emphasize Jungkook's record-breaking trajectory is the dominance of measurable, transparent data. Streaming numbers, chart placements, and engagement rates provide objective standards by which success can be judged. Jungkook's name consistently appears alongside figures that outpace even the most established US pop stars. For instance, his solo releases rapidly achieve hundreds of millions of streams, a feat that once required years of build-up for non-Western artists. His appearances on platforms like TikTok generate viral trends that translate into global participation, not limited to K-pop fandoms. Media analysis in the US increasingly acknowledges that these results cannot be dismissed as anomalies or attributed solely to a dedicated fanbase. Instead, they reflect structural shifts in how audiences consume music and how influence is distributed. Traditional gatekeepers, radio airplay, television appearances, and US-centric promotional campaigns no longer hold exclusive control over who rises to prominence. Jungkook's success exemplifies this shift, showing that an artist can bypass these filters and still dominate the US cultural conversation. Behind the headlines, the American music industry faces a critical question. What does Jungkook's dominance mean for domestic artists? Labels, managers, and strategists observe how his releases not only capture international markets, but also maintain strong performance in the US itself. The fact that his records compete directly with major American stars on Billboard charts forces reflection on promotional strategies. Some US artists rely heavily on marketing budgets, playlist placements, and traditional publicity campaigns. By contrast, Jungkook leverages organic momentum amplified by his reputation and global fanbase. US media narratives often underline this contrast. Articles highlight that Jungkook's impact is not manufactured through artificial hype, but emerges naturally from audience demand. When his songs debut at the top of streaming charts, the statistics reflect real-time listening behavior rather than heavy promotional spending. This difference creates an ongoing challenge for American acts, who now face the reality of competing not only with each other, but with international figures whose methods of engagement differ fundamentally from the US. Template. Another area where American media recognizes Jungkook's unmatched reach is in brand collaborations. His partnerships with global companies, most notably Calvin Klein, demonstrate the scale of his influence beyond the music industry. For US fashion outlets and business publications, Jungkook represents a case study in how celebrity endorsement has evolved. Traditional campaigns in the US once relied on Hollywood actors or domestic pop stars to drive visibility. Today, Jungkook's association with a brand can generate worldwide coverage within hours, dominating both mainstream outlets and social media platforms. This shift highlights a fundamental change in brand strategy. American companies no longer restrict themselves to US-based ambassadors because global consumers respond more strongly to figures like Jungkook. The fact that a Korean artist can anchor a brand campaign and outperform American celebrities in terms of reach and engagement is not lost on US media observers. Each new collaboration reinforces the perception that Jungkook operates at a level few others can reach. It is important to note that while many US outlets openly recognize Jungkook's dominance, there remains a degree of tension in the narrative. Historically, US media often positioned international acts as niche phenomena with limited staying power. However, Jungkook's consistent record-breaking undermines this framing. With each milestone, the possibility of dismissing his success as a passing trend diminishes. Instead, coverage increasingly shifts toward acknowledgement. There is no domestic equivalent capable of delivering the same combination of global reach, cultural influence, and measurable success. Yet this recognition does not come without resistance. Some commentary highlights the unique conditions of the K-pop industry, suggesting that coordinated fan activity inflates numbers. However, this argument weakens when compared with tangible results such as sold-out arenas across the United States, mainstream brand endorsements, and recognition from prestigious award bodies. US media outlets that prioritize empirical data eventually confront the conclusion that Jungkook's achievements are not artificially engineered, but structurally significant. The most important consequence of Jungkook's record-breaking achievements is the redefinition of what it means to be a global pop star. US media now discusses success not only in terms of domestic dominance, but international resonance. Jungkook's ability to generate conversation in multiple markets simultaneously sets a precedent for what the next generation of artists will need to achieve. For American stars, this raises the bar significantly. Competing within the US market is no longer sufficient. Audiences expect global connectivity, multilingual engagement, and cross-industry influence. In this sense, Jungkook does not merely compete with American artists, he reshapes the playing field entirely. His presence establishes new standards that shift the discourse away from traditional measures of stardom. US media coverage reflects this reality by acknowledging, sometimes reluctantly, that no current American star matches his combination of achievements. US media therefore emphasizes fan mobilization as a foundation, but not the entirety of his success. Instead, it highlights how Jungkook bridges the gap between fan-driven momentum and mainstream recognition. This combination is rare within the American music industry, where many artists rely either on niche fandoms or broad casual listenership, but seldom achieve dominance in both areas. Jungkook's dominance has forced adaptation across the US music industry. Labels and managers analyze his strategies to understand how an international artist penetrates the American market without relying on traditional pathways. Historically, acts outside the US required extensive promotional campaigns within the country, including late-night talk show appearances, radio tours, and collaborations with American producers. Jungkook, while engaging in some of these practices, demonstrates that they are not prerequisites for success in the streaming era. His releases often bypass heavy domestic promotion yet achieve record-breaking outcomes. For US industry professionals, this challenges assumptions about marketing priorities. It suggests that the key to dominance lies not in centralized promotion, but in creating content that travels organically across borders. US media frames this as a paradigm shift. Jungkook's trajectory indicates that future success will rely less on domestic radio spins and more on global streaming algorithms. As a result, American artists and their teams now explore strategies resembling those of K-pop acts, emphasizing visual storytelling, cultivating direct engagement through social media, and designing content optimized for short-form platforms like TikTok. The fact that Jungkook catalyzes these shifts rather than following them reinforces the perception that he is setting standards US artists must follow rather than the reverse. One persistent question in US media is how Jungkook achieves mainstream resonance despite linguistic barriers. English has traditionally functioned as the lingua franca of global pop music. Yet Jungkook's Korean language releases generate attention equal to and sometimes exceeding English tracks. His success challenges the assumption that non-English songs cannot penetrate the American mainstream. Coverage often notes that Jungkook alternates between Korean and English in his releases, reflecting adaptability rather than dependency. This duality allows him to maintain authenticity while ensuring accessibility. American outlets emphasize that this flexibility distinguishes him from domestic artists, who rarely venture into multilingual content. In a media environment increasingly attentive to diversity and global perspectives, Jungkook embodies an artist who navigates multiple cultural contexts without sacrificing reach. This dynamic resonates particularly strongly with younger demographics in the US, who consume content across languages on platforms like TikTok and Instagram. US media recognizes that linguistic exclusivity no longer defines cultural participation. Jungkook's ability to connect across boundaries validates this shift and further explains why no American act currently rivals his scope. His effectiveness as a brand ambassador stems from authenticity and alignment with consumer perception. Audiences perceive his collaborations as natural extensions of his image rather than forced endorsements. This contrasts with many US campaigns, where celebrity endorsements are viewed as transactional. Media analysis in the US highlights that Jungkook generates not just visibility but conversion. Fans and general consumers alike respond by purchasing products, amplifying content, and reshaping brand identity around his image. For American companies, this raises strategic considerations. The success of Jungkook's campaigns demonstrates that global icons outside the US can deliver stronger ROI than domestic stars. Consequently, US media reports often interpret his brand influence as another area where American figures cannot currently compete. The sustained attention Jungkook receives from American media also functions as a reinforcing cycle. Each record he breaks becomes a headline. Each headline increases visibility, which in turn contributes to further achievements. Outlets such as Billboard, Variety, Rolling Stone, and Forbes dedicate frequent coverage to his milestones, ensuring that his name remains consistently present in the US entertainment discourse. This coverage itself is part of the phenomenon. Historically, US media maintained a bias toward domestic stars, offering limited space to international figures unless they achieved extraordinary breakthroughs. Jungkook's consistent appearance in these outlets signals not only his dominance, but a structural change in what US media deems newsworthy. By devoting attention to his every milestone, they implicitly validate his status as an unmatched figure. Underlying these discussions is the central theme. Can any US artist rival Jungkook's combination of achievements? Media coverage often frames this rhetorically, concluding that the answer is no. While American stars maintain significant domestic influence, their global resonance appears narrower when measured against Jungkook's metrics. This imbalance reflects deeper structural changes in the entertainment landscape, where international audiences hold greater influence over cultural narratives than before. US outlets acknowledge this by positioning Jungkook not as a challenger, but as a benchmark. Articles increasingly compare American releases to his performance, implicitly recognizing him as the standard of success. In this context, the conclusion that no one can compete is not an exaggeration, but an observation grounded in measurable evidence.